Hi, I'm Anne-Marie from brambleberry.com. You've been asking a lot of questions about soap making, so I picked a few of them and I'm here to answer them today. So first, we have some soap making questions. The first one is from Katie Lenny DiLorenzo. Hi, Katie. In CP soap, how do you figure out what temperature is better for recipes with more hard oils and also recipes for soft oils? What helps most in determining the ideal soaping temp generally? It's a great question. So soap making is of course a science, right? You have to combine the oil and the water and the lye together and then you end up with a bar of soap. But things can go wrong, and temperature is one of those things that can really affect color. It can really affect texture. It can really affect if your soap goes through gel phase or not. It can affect if the soap cracks, if it even comes out of the mold. So, good question. I generally like to soap with my oils at about 120-ish and my lye water about 120-ish. I don't usually go about 20 degrees different, meaning if my lye water has cooled to about 105, I won't soap with my oils hotter than about 125, so just a 20 degree temperature difference, much more than that, and I find that the soap batter can get grainy and can also separate. Additionally, if you're soaping with hard oils like butters or even beeswax, you do need to keep your temperatures hotter, so keep that in mind. And if you're trying really hard to keep your soap from going through gel phase, you're gonna stay lower than me. Finally, fragrances really depend on temperature sometimes. And so if you have a fragrance oil that's gonna heat up, you wanna start with a lower temperature. And if you have a fragrance oil that's really delicate, say an essential oil, you might wanna soap lower so there's no flashing off of that delicate essential oil. Danielle King says, what are some of the factors that cause oil separation after pouring and letting it sit? I've been making soap for a few years, but here recently I've had issues with it. I don't know what's happening. Danielle, that must be so frustrating. So you've been making soap for a few years and now all of a sudden your soap is separating. Honestly, if your soap is separating, it's because it's not fully emulsifying together. It's not saponifying together. The reason I would assume for this is the lye. I would assume you're either accidentally using potassium hydroxide that's been mislabeled, or maybe you're using lye that's old, and when lye gets old, it's hygroscopic, meaning it pulls moisture to it. And so what happens when the moisture gets pulled to the lye is it gets heavier. So when you weigh out, like say you're like, oh, this is 8 ounces of lye, really it's not. It might be just about 6 ounces of active lye. So it's probably something around the lye. That's what I am guessing. It's either that or the fragrance oil. And if it's the same fragrance oil you've been soaping with for a long time, definitely ask your vendor about it, because if they're any good vendor like Brambleberry, they'll actually take your recipe, they'll take the oil and they'll go check it out for themselves to make sure that every single thing they're selling you works each and every time. All right, Patty PW, do you have any recommendations for soap makers in a hot country? The room temperature here is always 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Ooh, I wonder where you are. She says, so I got glycerin rivers on my soap all the time, and cutted soaps were sweaty even though I never changed my formula. I bet you got glycerin rivers. So let's talk about what glycerin rivers are first for people that don't know. Glycerin rivers, and I have glycerin rivers in this. So glycerin rivers are a really interesting byproduct of the soap making process. When soap is formed, glycerin naturally is a byproduct. Now, commercial people, like big Procter & Gamble type commercial people, they will actually harvest out that liquid glycerin and they will take it as a byproduct and then they sell it as glycerin. Part of the reason that handmade soap is so naturally good for skin and just better is because it retains all its naturally produced glycerin. But what this glycerin does when it's in the presence of extreme heat, and you can usually see it when you're using oxides, especially titanium dioxide, is it makes glycerin rivers, which are just these kind of cute little clear lines or rivers or squiggles where you're like, what is that? And it's actually naturally occurring glycerin. It's a beautiful thing. It doesn't hurt your soap at all. So don't stress out about it, except for the fact that maybe your design doesn't quite look the way you wanted it to. But to answer your question, what do you do if you are stuck soaping in a hot area? So making sure that when you are curing your soap, you are switching it all the time, meaning you are literally doing this, so there's plenty of airflow is really, really important. Trying to soap with more hard oils is going to help with that as well. The fact you're getting sweat on your cold process soap tells me your soap is actually, your oils are going a little bit rancid in your soap. So what that tells me is maybe your superfat is just a little bit too high. So drop that superfat down to probably 1 to 2%. Try and turn your bars more frequently. And when you can, use the coldest temperatures you possibly can for your lye water and your oils. And so like if you're at 98 degrees, you can soap at 100 or soap at 98 or soap at even 80 degrees if you can, and do that. Your soap is still going to saponify, it's still going to harden, but it might not go through as hot of a gel phase. So those are my tips, and wherever you're at, my goodness, good luck. It's really, really warm there. So I've seen a couple questions about fragrancing in soap. So Mrs. Joy says, I can't get a good scent throw, and Lavendo soap wants to know, how do I improve my fragrances in my cold process soap? So part of this is just the fragrance oils you're buying. Make sure you're buying from a fully tested vendor, right? Like for every fragrance Brambleberry brings in, we've tested 100 at least, and they're tested in small batches and big batches. In fact, these are some of our bigger batches that we test with just for some fragrances that didn't make it in. So make sure you're testing from a fully tested fragrance vendor. That's the first thing. Second, if you're using things like cocoa butter, sometimes those will decrease and tamp down on the amount of scent that you're getting. So keep that in mind. Beeswax will do the same thing. And then third, there is a limit to how much fragrance you can put into your soap. Make sure you're maxing out the amount of fragrance you can safely put into your soap based on regulations. Use the fragrance calculator at brambleberry.com to see what that is. And then fourth, a lot of soap makers will, once they're fully cured, take their soaps and they'll put them into like a Tupperware container, but they'll keep the soap up. So like this, like doing it like something like this. So the soap is up and getting airflow, but then they'll shove cotton balls with the fragrance into that Tupperware so that the bars are saturated with the fragrance. It's kind of the concept of using like a scent thing in your car, right? It smells delicious. So that will help keep your soap smelling really strong. And then finally, make sure you're turning over your soap, meaning you are actually selling it or giving it away or using it pretty quickly, because there is a limit to how long anything is gonna smell delicious, whether it's soap that's handmade or a candle or laundry detergent. It just smell does eventually go away because it's molecules that waft off into the air. Some of my favorite fragrances from brambleberry.com that stay really strong are like the lilac, the tobacco and bay leaf, relaxing and vanilla select have been around forever. Lavender has been around forever. Those are really fantastic. They stay really strong in soap. And so maybe also picking just some best sellers that are tried and true from hundreds and thousands of soap makers across the nation might help too. Maria Rivera asks, hi, I'm new at this, and so far I'm just making melt and pour. So can I mix 2 different melt and pour bases, or will it clash? Ooh, good question. So melt and pour is actually really great for newbies because you don't have to use sodium hydroxide or lye, and it's totally kid safe, and it's a great way to get into soap making because there's no cure time. There's about 4 or 5 different melt and pour manufacturers kind of out there, and can you switch their bases and mix and match? The answer is not really. So some of the types of melt and pour soap that's out there is kind of more natural. It's made a certain type of way with no synthetic detergents, and it's made in sort of a more old-fashioned way. Some of the melt and pour out there is made much more chemically, with more synthetics, not made nearly as traditionally. Those two, if you mix those 2 different styles together, end up doing stuff like if you did like new versus old kind of up here, the layers might fall apart, or the embeds might come out, or something like that. So basically, if it's from the same manufacturer, yeah, mix and match away, absolutely. But if it's 2 different manufacturers, one's a synthetic melt and pour soap and one's a more naturally derived melt and pour soap, those probably won't, they'll mix, but eventually they will delaminate because they are evaporating out their moisture at different rates. Araya Kanjali wants to know, how do I stop my CP soap, so my cold process soap, from forming a slimy layer in the shower? I've added hard oils, I've added butters, I've introduced a water discount, I've cured for longer, and nothing seems to work. Whew, Araya, that sounds really frustrating, but congratulations. The fact that your soap is getting slimy in the shower means you are making handmade soap, which is the best type of soap in the entire world to go on your body, your friends' bodies, and your loved ones' bodies. And yeah, it does get slimy in the shower if it doesn't dry out between uses. That is true. That is because it's retaining all its naturally occurring glycerin, which can get slimy. So what do? 1. Make sure you have a really well-formulated recipe. If you haven't looked at like some of the Brambleberry in the studio posts about well-formulated recipes, go back and read some of those. But I would really start with like a 33% palm, a 33% coconut, and a 33% olive oil. Do it, well, 33.3%. Do it at a 4% lye discount or 4% discount, and then you don't even need to water discount that, and see what you think about that after a full cure time. 2, are you fully curing? Make sure your soap is really cured for a solid 6 weeks before using it or giving it away. 3, make sure that you are also using a draining soap dish in the shower. You have to use it with handmade soap, period, no ifs, ands, or buts. So make sure that your handmade soap is being taken care of and given a little bed after you shower of a draining soap dish. And finally, consider some sodium lactate. Sodium lactate is a natural salt. It is a natural product. You put it in the lye water and it helps your soap get harder, faster. And yes, it does extend the life of your soap in the shower. So it is a common issue with the soap kind of getting a little slimy if it doesn't dry out in between uses. But the second you start drying that soap out in between uses, cold process soap lasts as long or longer in the shower as synthetic detergent bars. MZ Vanessa 10 said, my frozen goat's milk curdled and turned orange. Can I still use it in my cold process soap? Ooh, friend, you know what? Soap making is just like cooking. If you put stuff in that's bad to start with, you're not gonna end up with good products in the end. So if you had said, my soap turned orange after I put the lye water into it, can I still use it? I would have said yes, because milk that gets hot with lye water does scorch and it turns orange and it smells bad. And then after about 10 days, it's totally fine and it doesn't smell bad anymore. But if your milk curdled and turned orange before you put it in, there is something wrong with that milk. Don't start with it. It's not worth ruining an entire batch of soap to try and use curdled milk. Organic Bliss is asking, how do I get vibrant colors in CP soap? Ooh, this is a great question. How do you get vibrant colors in CP soap? Well, first of all, recognize you are starting to try and overcolor something that is opaque in nature. So anytime you add anything to white, it goes pastel. So how do you get these bright, vibrant colors? Well, these are obviously all Brambleberry colors. And the first tip is just start with a brighter color. What you see is what you get. So if you are starting with a pastel, like this was a pastel pink, this is a pink iron oxide, you will get a pastel. So start with brighter colors to start with in the entire recipe. 2, force gel phase. When you force gel phase, the soap gets hotter and it gets more translucent, meaning it kind of has like a almost see-through look. And this is cold process soap, and it ends up having almost a slightly see-through look, and the soap really gets a little shinier, which allows the colors to just absolutely pop out. And then 3, make sure when you are soaping that you're taking into account the fragrance oils you use. Some fragrance oils will turn your soap purples or browns or greens. So make sure you're using a fragrance that's kind of water white and won't discolor over the colors you're trying to get. It's entirely possible. These soaps are all really bright and gorgeous, and they're just ones I had laying around the studio from soaps we've made in the last month. It's entirely possible. Start with bright colors, gel phase, and a little bit of sodium lactate will also help with that shininess, and you're gonna end up with brighter colors each and every time. Oli says with another question, wants to know what's most rewarding about my work. Wow, that's a genuinely really hard answer. First of all, I love the alchemy with soap making. There is something magical about it, like creating something from nothing, starting with lye and water and oil, and then creating something that looks like this, like that is magic. I will never tire of this. But that's the creation, and that's like the creative fun part. The other part that I have to say is probably the best about my work is working with a team of people that's passionately crafty and passionately committed to helping people live their most creative lives. Like, there is not one person that works at Brambleberry, from someone that's filling fragrance oils to packing boxes to taking photographs in the studio, that isn't fully committed to helping people live a life of creativity. Because we believe that creativity helps you live a life of love, and we believe that we're the best ones to help you be creative. And so because of that, my team is just really phenomenal. Like, I love working with them. It is my favorite part of really every day. And then my last favorite part of every day is always, 11 o'clock when I should have my phone down, but instead I'm on Instagram scrolling the Bramble on hashtag and seeing what people create with our products. Because there's so many cool things that people do that I am constantly inspired and blown away by everyone's creativity. So I'm really lucky to do what I do. I feel very thankful every day. So thanks for being a customer. Thanks for being a watcher. Thanks for subscribing to our channel. You guys are awesome. Until next time, happy soaping.